Well, let me applaud you on those particularly interesting mental gymnastics you just pulled, and I assured you it's just phonetic what I said in ordering those organizations. But look, this is rich talk. Started a war with Turkey. When it comes down to issues like Russia, Syria, Israel, of which the United Nations response has been respectively useless, ineffective, and inflammatory, not appropriate to just go along to get along. Sometimes it's more appropriate to take a stand and to stand for what is right. And that is what the Conservative Party is going to do unapologetically. So the question I have for you, because I guess I'm supposed to have a question, is why do you disagree with the premise of taking a stand, and why do you believe it's more appropriate for Canada to utilize that image of going along to get along to work for an organization which often acts diametrically opposed to some of our Western interests?
Well, I think that the listeners can quite hear from the aggression in the voice of my honourable friend that there is a clear difference between the policies of the Conservatives and the NDP on this issue. We simply believe that consensus is the best way forward, that we're not going to quote-unquote push our way, stand up, if you will, which is basically, seems to me to be a bit of code for bullying when it comes to these other nations.
With all due respect, I apologize if you took my tone as anything as inflammatory, but let me tell you what in my mind bullying is. In my mind, bullying is when you have the United Nations and Canada as a sole member, which has consistently stood up for the state of Israel, while other nations in the League of Member Nations of the United Nations will pressure Canada to simply go along to get along because it's what's often politically expedient, to oppose Israel, to ignore Russia, to be ineffective on Syria because it's what's politically expedient. Let me tell you that is not what compromise, that is not what consensus is. It's called being weak. And Canada can be a consensus nation while being strong, but it does not mean sacrificing the core principles that we as Canada, a beacon of stability and hope, stand for. And that, in my mind, is a shameful position to have.
Well, I'm not quite sure exactly how to respond to that beyond saying that I respectfully disagree that the type of strength offered by the Conservative Party as the alternative isn't quite what we're looking for. We're looking for the strength to stand up and say, we want peace.
Okay, for this particular debate between you two, we only have about 8 seconds left, so I'll move on to Carol.
My question is to the honorable member of the Libertarian Party, Reformed. You said that you were completely against intervention. Does that mean that you will therefore end our involvement in the Middle East, where we have already intervened, or will you and your party plan on continuing those missions there?
We're not totally against intervention. Sometimes I believe that it may be necessary. I think there's a lot of times, if you look at the U.S. involvement in Iraq, several of their times they went into Iraq, they made a mistake doing so, and they've probably destabilized the region further than it was when they started. So. But I do not believe that it's a responsible policy to try and pull out of our peacekeeping missions. That's the sort of intervention that I think has a positive effect on our planet here, and that's the sort of thing that I'm trying to keep. We are already involved in the Middle East, as you mentioned. I don't think that it's a responsible policy to pull out when we see this group as ghastly as ISIS. They've been committing human rights abuses across the board, and we're already in the Middle East. I do not believe that we should be pulling out at this time.
Okay. Do you believe? Well, when is the time that you believe that we should pull out then?
I believe when ISIS is defeated, when they have completely been crushed, they've lost all their territory, and the Iraqi and Syrian governments, they've taken back that territory. That's when I believe that it's Canada's time to return home and send our military back.
So does that therefore mean that you guys will not stay in to help ensure that the Iraqi and Syrian governments are stable, or will you pull out before they have the chance to organize their stability?
This is when you get into this is a very complicated issue. Now we're getting into a tough spot where how long do you need to stay in order to ensure stability? If we kept a military delegation there till the end of time, that's probably the best way to increase stability in the region. But I don't think that anybody wants us to permanently station a huge military force in Iraq and Syria. So I believe that there would be a short period of time after the defeat of ISIS, because we don't want, obviously, we're not going to be pulling our troops out all at once. So I think that I would support staying in the Middle East for a small period of time, but not very long.
Thank you.
How much money does NDP want to spend to trying to win a Security Council seat? So, for example, Turkey spent about $85 million on its campaign, and Australia spent just under $25 million. So, how much is NDP is going to spend, and is there a ceiling for that campaign limit? Because to think that we can just get a seat without any campaign or anything like that is, well, just delusional. So how much will NDP spend on that?
Well, of course, all of our diplomatic maneuvers is going to take a little bit of money. But when you're talking about, for example, $30 million or something in that neighborhood, I don't think it's unfair to get on perhaps one of the most powerful diplomatic councils in the world to ask, every Canadian to pitch in a loonie. I think that's a fair request, to be honest.
Well, what if you lose?
Well, obviously we're not attempting to go out there and lose this. We're going to be aiming to get a seat on the Security Council.
But if you don't, you just spent a lot of money on that, and you are competing with other countries that has much more stake, much more can offer. Many of the countries that running against Canada has much more overseas development funding for foreign aid. So
I don't think it's necessarily a question of who's going to be able to campaign more. I think that as Canada, we have an important role to play, and I think a lot of other nations really accept that.
So would NDP commit to a ceiling on the amount spent on trying to get the seat?
Well, obviously this is something we're going to have to look at upon forming the government. It isn't really something I can commit to here this beautiful afternoon in this debate.
If I have the time to jump in here.
I yield to Karen.
Zhang, from your discussion, it seems that you're saying that Canada should not even should just not try to join the Security Council. Is that correct?
No, like I said, I support the bid, but I don't support, and we don't support to compromising our principles, because it's widely reported that the campaign is filled with corruption and nice gestures and free trips for every diplomatic personnel, and we don't think that's productive.
Okay.
Last debate, you spoke about how you would balance liberty and security, but in this debate, please elaborate on how your government will actually implement policies that will keep Canadians safe and our national interests protected, whatever those interests may be. Zhang has the floor.
Well, we already talked about this in the last debate. So our plan is mainly focused on mental health service. We will provide immediate funding for mental health service and to improve the system across the board. And we believe that we should pursue alternatives to prison in the justice system to ensure that people are rehabilitated and are successfully integrated back to society after their sentence, so they are less prone to the radicalization by extremist and violent ideologies. And we will implement policies that we don't think that foreign terrorism pose a very big threat right now, given our existing funding to RCMP and CCs and existing powers to them, and we will increase oversight, but we will still support the work of our officers and to keep us safe. And yeah.
Well, look, let me just be frank. Our interest is keeping Canadians safe here at home and abroad. The Conservative Party will not cut and run in that initiative, and similarly, we won't cut and run in our fight against ISIS. We will reprioritize and strengthen our resolve against the Islamic State, and we will make sure that Daesh will be defeated. Similarly, we're going to make sure that here at home, their hateful ideology does not spread, whether it be securing our financial and federal frameworks of cybersecurity through utilizing Canada's Vital Cyber Systems Act when Parliament comes back, or whether it's simply strengthening, as I said before, our resolve against homegrown terrorism, becoming more resilient to these threats through counter-domestic and international terrorist counter efforts in that regard, working with our partners, working with the United States, working with the logistics of sending aid, not only humanitarian aid to the region, but military aid to our allies who are engaged in the fight against the Islamic State. And similarly, it's important to counter terrorism and youth radicalization through, of course, research and education. Doing this will not only strengthen Canada's resolve against extremism and violent extremism at that, but we will make sure that Canada's resolve against the Islamic State is not only shared against our partners, with our partners in the international community, but also here at home with ordinary Canadians willing to act, willing to stand, and willing to take a stance against the Islamic State and to ensure that Canada remains safe at all costs against all threats.
I believe it's my turn. Like everyone has stated, we believe in protecting our citizens at home and abroad. At home, we plan on introducing and promoting community outreach programs and counter-radicalization programs through certain community groups and through education programs and policy. And promoting that through provinces as well, and trying to get their help. We have these plans will help to ensure and prevent our young susceptible children and general adults who might be susceptible to radicalization, and we want to prevent that at the bud instead of preventing homegrown terrorism. But our people abroad, as we have stated before, we have missions in the Middle East. We have soldiers there, and to protect them, we have plans to improve their equipment, such as their tanks, and also plans to improve our surface ships. Protecting our military and